Welcome to the Mischief. I'm Valen, and this is Botania Basics, the Lexica Botania tutorial in video form. Welcome to Botania, a mod by Vasky. In order to get started in Botania, you're going to want to craft yourself a book, plus any old sapling should do. Make yourself a Lexica Botania. You can also find these books sometimes in dungeon chests or other type loot tables. And once you open this book, you should have access to many different things. A nice welcome page that you can then page through by either clicking the arrows here, or you can use your scroll wheel on your mouse to go forward and backwards. Plus, you can always go back an entire section just by pressing this arrow at the bottom here. There are many keys on your keyboard that can also be used in a similar fashion. If you go back far enough, you'll be able to see this item selection menu here, where you can choose the different chapters and research just about anything you want about this mod. But there are also other features that this book will offer you, and that is the show notes option here, where you can actually type in different notes as you need fit and save them for future use. On top of that, you can hover over the different items here and choose them as you'd like. Plus, you can also change your Botania options, access the advancements, which you can see here are similar to the Minecraft advancements as well. Or you can choose this little challenges option at the bottom here and choose any number of different challenges on how to actually accomplish different tasks in kind of a Skyblock style, where you'll have some sort of task that you need to use Botania and vanilla Minecraft in order to complete. On top of that, you can change the scale so that it can best be seen by you. In this case, I've got it at full magnification, just so you guys can see it easier. I highly recommend that if you have any questions about this mod, that you go to the Lexicon Index. Click on here, and you can then start searching through the different topics, or you can start searching different items. I can type in sword, and therefore I see something up here. Now, if I press Shift while on a topic, it will give you a brief image of the things inside and the number of pages it contains. Therefore, you can see there are many Man of Steel equipments in here. Different items, tools, weapons, and armors. On top of that, this book will also help you identify things. If I press left shift on top of an item, it will tell you that it is a grass block in this case, carpet, an anvil. It will even identify certain items from Botania. Now, if I choose something from Botania specifically, and while holding shift, I right-click, it will then open to that page directly. If I choose something that is non-Botania related, for instance, like Minecraft here, and I right-click, it will take me to a Minecraft wiki equivalent page on my web browser. For further description of the book itself, if I choose something in here, and you'll notice some of these are in italics, while others are not. The items in italics are recommended the basics, things you should know before moving further into this mod. And then also a small feature, you notice the title here says Lexica Botania 347th edition. You can access an anvil, of course, put it in here. You can change it to something else, rename it, and it will also keep that book on the cover itself. The edition number that you see here, 347, is the current mod version that you are using, which will change as you update Botania to the latest mod version. Let's move on to mystical flowers, something a little bit more interesting, as you can see behind me here. In order to tell the difference between Botania flowers and vanilla flowers, the difference is going to be obvious. One is shiny, one is not. They come in two different heights, your normal 1-block height as well as your 2-block height, but you should know that if you want to harness any of the 2-block heights, you will require a set of shears in order to do so. Other flowers you can just access by punching them, like so, and I can pick it up. They come in a variety of colors, 16 to be exact, and you can also create them should you have difficulty in locating them. In order to make them, you'll just need a few basic ingredients to make floral fertilizer. In order to craft floral fertilizer, which will allow you to grow more of those flowers from Botania, you can actually craft it in one of two ways. Your more vanilla method is going to be dandelion yellow, plus rose red and some bone meal will make you one floral fertilizer. Alternately, you can actually take some of the existing flowers and make more with it. Using floral fertilizer on the ground will produce a few nearby Botania flowers that you can then harness and keep for yourself. Taking these flowers into an inventory will therefore give you petals in return. Each of these can be used in order to create more flowers or be used in making other ingredients as well as powders. As you can see here, I've turned all of my flowers into petals, and I can further that by taking a bowl, some planks, and a stick to make pestle and mortar. Combine this pestle and mortar with any of these flowers and you'll get yourself some purple powder in this case because I have some purple leaves. I can also do this with brown, cyan, green, etc. I have multiple uses for each of these. First and foremost, a petal planted in the ground will create a small shimmer area where it was planted. If you then take some bone meal, you can further produce more flowers, albeit at a double height, and therefore you will need your shears in order to harvest them properly. Then you can turn them into even more petals, therefore propagating your flowers at an infinite rate. Now something like the powders you can use to color things, like carpet, or, in this case, wool, in any number of colors according to those that you have here. Now, some of these may be a bit much to fill up one's inventory, in which case you'll probably want to craft a flower pouch, which is simply made with some wool and another petal. Inside of one of these pouches is 16 different slots for the 16 different single height flowers, so if you're collecting the double height flowers, it will not fit into here, but it will then place up to 1 stack's worth of flowers in here as you pick them up. And now, if you notice here, I have a pink mystical flower. If I throw this on the ground and I just walk over it, it will go into my inventory because I'm holding on to the pouch. If I'm not holding onto the pouch and walk into it, it will then go directly into the pouch, whether it's in my inventory or on my hotbar. There it is. As a side note, you should know that you can also take a pestle and mortar and any number of the shimmering mushrooms you may find in the world and create all sorts of powders from those as well. Next we'll be making a petal apothecary. Petal apothecary is a simple tool that is going to be used in order to make further items. Allow me to demonstrate. Simply made with some cobblestone and another one of the flower petals here. Grab that and you can then place it down in the world. Simple enough. Next, you'll need yourself at least 1 bucket of water in order to get things going. Now, there are multiple ways that you can proceed with this. You can actually decorate it a little bit if you so desire. And in this case, we have our standard petal apothecary. You take a bit of water, fill it up, and you now have an apothecary ready to receive different petals for your different mystical incantations. For instance, I'll be using 4 mystical white petals by throwing them out of my inventory and 1 seed, and I created a pure daisy, which is a strange and mysterious flower that is going to help you on your way. That did use up the water in here, but not to worry. Things can be automated with this, because if there currently is any water in a petal apothecary, it will give off a redstone signal from a comparator. On top of that, you can further customize your apothecary by just taking things like vines to give it more of a mossy effect, or turn it into the ultimate trash can. Put a bit of lava in there. You won't get injured by walking around on this. The sparks around it will not damage any of your terrain, but anything that you throw inside of it will get destroyed. Once again, you can always remove any of the water from the apothecary with a bucket, and it will of course change your comparator reading. Put it back in, and if you put something inside of it that you did not mean to, for instance, mystical cyan petal. Oh, I just put that in there and did not want that. Give it back. Well, in order to do that, you press Shift and right-click with an empty hand, and the last item put in will go back into your inventory. Now, if I have a lot of recipes to create, perhaps I want to make a whole lot of pure daisies. 1, 2, 3, 4. Throw in a seed to finish the recipe, and I get that back. If I grab another bucket of water, fill this back up, and right-click with an empty hand, it will add in the same recipe over again. Just like that. Then all I need to do is add in a seed. And you have a 20-second time limit in order to accomplish that. Now, I already have been making pure daisies. What is a pure daisy? A pure daisy is going to be a catalyst for making more materials that you'll be needing for other items. First and foremost, you'll be needing living wood and living stone. As you can see here, I have all of the traditional vanilla Minecraft woods, and I place this down. You'll see that it starts giving off a lot of particles. Same thing with the stone here. Each one will generate, over time, a bit of magic about these items. Now, I can, of course, still put them down. It's in a 1 block radius completely around the flower. So if you look here, when I look at the flower, it actually highlights some of the area that you can still see. Now, if you wait long enough, you'll notice that everything will start changing by itself. It does take a bit of time, so have some patience. As you notice, I placed this one log down a little bit later than the rest, so it will end up transforming a little bit later. Once you've transformed these things, you can harvest them with your traditional tools. Living wood, obviously, would be harvested with an axe, and living rock with a pick. Now that's not all that pure daisies are good for. Obviously, they are going to make living wood and living rock, which are going to be necessary in a lot of uses going forward, but they can also transform some other strange things. For instance, I have here netherrack, soul sand, ice, water. These can all be transformed into another item. Simply by putting down a pure daisy, it will turn into cobblestone, sand, packed ice, and snow. Next thing you'll want to craft is going to be a wand of the forest. In order to make one of these, you'll need to take some of your living wood and make yourself some twigs. Living wood twigs, that is. Once you've got 3 of those, you can then put them in a crafting grid with some petals of your preference. Make yourself a wand of the forest. The petal will actually change visibly on here. Craft it up and you now have the wrench, tool, or key to this mod. You can change modes just by simply shift right-clicking in the air. You've got function mode and binding mode. Binding mode will allow you to link 2 mana-producing or absorbing items, whereas function mode will simply allow you to better arrange things. You can also shift right-click things that can be rotated, like this anvil for instance, or different chests and such, but primarily the bind mode is going to be the most common use, so that you can shift right-click on something and shift right-click on something else in order for them to be linked to these different items, as you can see with the little rainbow effect that is happening as I link these together. You're probably wondering what a lot of these things might be, but not to worry. First, we're going to learn about mana. Mana is the power of this mod. It is a liquefied form of it as well, but it doesn't do anything by itself. You'll need to use it to power different flowers, machines, whatever you'd like to call them, as this is a tech mod in disguise. Generating flowers. Flowers that generate mana, like this hydrangea here, or these endoflames here. These will generate mana, which you can store in a mana pool. These are 3 different types that I have here. One that is a standard mana pool, a diluted mana pool, and of course the creative one that I have just for creative uses. But the diluted one will only hold a very small amount. The mana doesn't just appear in each of these pools though, it needs to be placed there. Not by the flower, but by something called a mana spreader. As you see here, on occasion, you'll notice a small green beam shoots from the mana spreader into one of the pools, like so. And if I take my wand of the forest and look at this hydrangea, right-click on it, I can see that the internal mana buffer is empty because it is currently powering the mana spreader. When I right-click on the mana spreader, I will get an update as to how much mana it currently has stored in its buffer, and it will therefore launch into this mana pool because that's where it's currently aiming. So this is kind of a power network. This is generating power, this is your power pipes, and this is your battery. Now, if you want to see how the status is currently going with your power network, just hold down the right click on something like the mana spreader and you can see the mana is currently building inside of it. Once it gets to a certain size, it will then start teleporting it across the network to where it is pointing. It can also be used to power different items that you might carry on you. For instance, I currently have a sash that is using that, as well as a tiara that allows me a limited amount of creative flight. Now, what else can mana pools be used for besides just storing things? They are also a way of transforming some items. In this chest here, I have a large list. It looks a bit disoriented, but everything on the left here, iron ingots, blocks of iron, diamonds, blocks of diamonds, nether quartz, can all be, when dropped into a mana pool, turned into a mana equivalent. Iron turns into mana steel, block of iron turns into a block of mana steel, and so on and so forth. You can also turn glass into mana glass, ender pearls into mana pearls, cookies into biscuits of totality, string into mana infused string, and a glass bottle can be filled with mana. On top of that, you can also take sugar, redstone, gunpowder, glowstone, or any number of the different colored powders, drop them in any kind of mana pool, and provided you have enough mana, you should be able to turn any of these items into their mana equivalent, in this case, mana powder. Now I'm going to take an iron ingot here and just demonstrate how it's done. As this is a very small diluted pool, it used up a considerable amount. You notice that a good chunk is missing. If I obtain another iron ingot and toss it into this one here, you'll notice that it is about 2/3 of the way full. Throw it in. Very little is used because this is the much larger version. Now on top of that, you'll notice that I have a comparator hooked up to the mana pool. Depending upon how full it is, as it may be with chests, it will also give out a redstone reading. If I take this creative mana tablet, which is also a portable version of storing mana, throw this in here, it will then start filling even further, and you can see that it is currently extending even more and allowing for an even bigger redstone signal. Last but not least, if you don't care for how these things look, you can always take a little bit of your powder and change the color of the pool itself. Now that we know about these batteries, let's learn about how to transport them. A mana spreader is made simply with a bit of living wood, a gold ingot, and some sort of either petal or mushroom of magical make. Crafting it up, you can then place it down on the ground, and wherever you place it, it should face generally in the direction that you are standing. If you look on the other sides, you'll notice that all of the sides are currently just kind of solid with a small greenish pattern, and you'll have this little eye rotating on one side. That's the side that it's going to shoot the beam out from. These can be directed with your Wand of the Forest. By right-clicking on it, you will update its current mana inventory, which in this case, it's empty. You can also link it. If I want this mana spreader to aim at this mana pool, then shift right-click the mana spreader and shift right-click the mana pool, and it will aim directly at that block. Now, if there is something in the way, it can prove difficult. If I want this mana spreader to aim at this mana spreader, it shouldn't have too much of a problem, provided that there isn't something in the way. If one of these levers blocks it, there is another way of manually changing the direction that it's aiming at. Currently, you can see that it is highlighting when I look at this mana spreader. The other mana spreader is, in fact, receiving a signal. On top of that, if I change to function mode and I shift right-click and hold down the right-click, I can then, while aiming, change where it is currently going to launch. And you can see if it's actually hitting something that can accept the mana, it will then light that source up, allowing you to better aim, because otherwise it's going to aim directly at the center of a block. Now you'll notice that I have a couple of different looking mana spreaders here, a pulse mana spreader and a standard one. Currently, we're going to look at the regular mana spreader. If you look, while I'm holding onto the wand, it shows kind of a laser beam of where it can shoot mana. If I hold nothing or something else besides the wand itself, it goes back to normal Minecraft. And if I hold my Wand of the Forest again, you'll notice that there's a spark down at the end here. This represents where the mana will start fading away. You'll start getting less returns. It will lose some of its mana on its way to its final destination down at this end here. So if you want to make sure that you can get your mana from one point to another, it's best to have it within range. Now you'll also notice I have a lever here. Currently, this mana spreader is full, but it is not depositing the mana inside at that mana pool that it is currently linked up to. Now, if I were to just right-click this, turn it on, it will then start launching its contents into the pool at the end. And you can see it is currently just kind of shooting the mana down into the pool, which it's barely getting any in there because it's at the very extreme end of it. Flick the lever and it will stop doing any more. Now, normally though, I would be able to do that, but if I want this to aim, let's say, at this block here. I flick the lever, nothing happens. The reason being is that this block does not accept mana, so therefore it will not launch anything at it. But in the case of a pulse mana spreader, it will. So if I pull the lever, it will still launch the mana regardless of if there is a mana accepting object at the other end of that beam. For example, if I have multiple of these down here, I can then turn this on. Each one of these can then launch mana. Now, in order to deposit mana from a pool into a mana spreader, you just need to simply have a mana spreader backed up to a mana pool. It just needs to be next to it, and then it will launch out. And you can see in this case, it is currently launching a lot of this mana around in a circular fashion. Now let's say that you've got a lot of these going, it's getting a little bit annoying. You don't want to have to worry about any of this noise. Not to worry, you can get yourself a little bit of wool, just about any color, and put them on the respective mana spreaders and change them to a quiet version. Oh, and in this case, much more decorative. In order to remove the covers, simply just right-click with an empty hand, and it comes back off. You may have noticed that when I look at some objects, an outline will appear. This is due to a Mana Seer monocle, which is made simply with a little bit of gold nuggets, and Mana Steel ingot, and Mana Glass. Put that in your bauble slot, and you can then see the affected area by multiple different flora. Now let's get into generating flora. Generating flora are flowers that will basically create mana for you, whether they be passive, manual, or automatable. A passive example is going to be the hydrangea. Uh-oh, something's happened here. That's not good. The hydrangea that was in here expired. That's right. It's a passive flower that can give you mana for a short time. Then it expires and turns into, well, in this case, a couple of sticks. But a hydrangea is intended on being used for absorbing water. In this case, if I were to grab a bit of these and eliminate those, it eats the water, as you saw there, and it will turn it into mana. It currently is linked, if you see here when I look at the flower, while holding my wand, it is linked to that mana spreader. The mana spreader then shoots the mana into the mana pool. And it will do so for about 1 real-life hour. And then it will expire and turn into sticks. Something that's a little bit less passive and a little bit more manual is going to be this, the Endoflame. The Endoflame is something that will eat objects like a furnace does. For example, you can throw coal, wood, or other burnable materials at the Endoflame and it will produce mana in a similar fashion to the hydrangea. The only differences are if you have something like a bucket of lava, it will not function with that because there is a side item on there, or rather a byproduct of the bucket. So it will not function with something like a lava bucket. But as long as it's a burnable producer of fuel up to and including 4 times that of a coal block, it should still function, or less at least. Now a hydrangea and an Endoflame can both be created in a petal apothecary that's been filled with water, simply by adding in a few mystical petals or shimmering mushrooms of the appropriate color, then following it up with a seed should yield you one of the appropriate flower. In the Endoflame's case, it's going to be a couple brown, 1 light gray, and 1 red. Now these should get you started and well into the beginnings of Botania. A hydrangea, as I said, has a limited lifespan and can only last for about an hour. Spamming these is not going to be that productive. Endoflames, on the other hand, can be automated and temporarily manually used. Therefore, just by throwing some fuel on there, for instance, I have a little bit of tiny coal, throw that on here, and it will eventually eat that burnable material and turn it into mana, which it then puts in the mana spreader that is then used in this mana pool. Now that could take a lot of time and effort because if I throw down a couple of these, you'll notice that it doesn't eat both. It'll only eat 1, which did take a little bit of time for it to get to the second one. So if I throw an entire stack of coal on this, it could despawn before those start going away. So in this case, I have a very simple early game setup. You'll want to create yourself an open crate, which is made simply with some living wood planks, which is just made with a piece of living wood placed in a crafting grid, and place it above a wooden pressure plate, 3 pieces of redstone, and a hopper facing in. I have the hopper filled with some kind of fuel, and I've got a lever on the side to turn this entire contraption on and off. You place them down as such, pull the lever, and it will deposit out 1 piece of fuel for it to work. Now, if you notice, I have a highlighted area. Currently, the endoflame is going to eat anything that is flammable or burnable in this entire area. And in this case, it's right next to it. So it will therefore produce mana at a constant rate, constantly dropping 1 piece, 1 piece, 1 piece, and not spamming the entire world with all sorts of drops. Now be sure when you're done with this to turn it off so that you don't leave things running all the time. Now for an example of functional flora. Something like this Claysonia here. This Claysonia is a unique item. It is designed to turn sand into clay. Allow me to grab a bit out of here. I've got a bunch of sand. I also have a hopper hawk. A hopper hawk is something that is going to pick up any items nearby. If I throw down a little bit of an item here, it's going to pick those up unless they are specified on this chest that it is next to. In this case, clay. So, to start with the Claysonia, which is being powered currently, if I look here, hovering over the Claysonia, you can see that that pool is currently highlighted. It is gaining mana from that mana pool in order to turn sand into clay. Just like that. I just place it down, turns into clay. Really cool. Anywhere in the area that is highlighted. Now you notice that I made a big mess. Well, that's where the hopper hawk comes in. It's currently set up with an option to turn it on and off, and it will then pick all these items up and place them in a nearby chest. Some of these plants will have the option of being able to be turned on and off, like the hopper hawk, for example. The way to find that out is by looking at its recipe. If its recipe involves a redstone root, then it can be turned on and off by some sort of lever or redstone activation. Next, we get into the runic altar. Runic altar is useless on its own. It's made simply with some living rock and a little bit of either a mana pearl or a mana diamond in a crafting grid. Place it down, and it will do absolutely nothing for you unless you power it and add ingredients. It's kind of a makeshift brewing station / crafting table. It also reacts with a comparator, as you would with some of the other items. In this case, I have runes. It's a runic altar. It uses runes. It also makes runes. For instance, a rune of water is going to be made with a mana powder, mana steel ingot, bone meal, sugarcane, and fishing rod. Will get you 2. And in this case, I have a whole bunch of ingredients. I'm going to make myself a rune of air, which is made simply with feather, mana steel ingot, mana powder, white carpet, and a piece of string. Now, there are ways of making this that are sometimes easier, sometimes less. But first and foremost, you should know that it requires mana being fed into it. So you will have to have one of your mana spreaders hooked up to a pool, feeding it mana. And with that, you can either throw the items on top, or you can just right-click them. And you can add them to the entire item. You'll hear that when you know that things are currently working properly. And you'll get this little demonstration of time going by as it progresses. Now you'll notice I'm getting a signal of 1 power. When it finished, it went to 2. Therefore, this can be automated as well, as it is also one of the challenges. Here's the problem though. In order to retrieve the rune that I'm trying to make, you'll need to actually, I recommend standing on top of it, toss down a piece of living rock, then take your wand and right-click before you pick it back up. You then get 2 runes of air in this case. And as before, I can also right-click with an empty hand to put all the same stuff back in and have the whole process start over again. Now the different types of runes are going to be your different elemental ones, water, earth, fire, and air, which are relatively simple to make. Then you've got your runes of autumn, spring, summer, and winter, which often will use the previous level of runes in their creation. Then you've got your top tier ones, the rune of pride, greed, envy, sloth, wrath, lust, gluttony, and last but not least, the Rune of Mana. These ones down here are your top tier ones, which will often require multiples of the previous tiers. Each of these can be used in the creation of making all sorts of different devices and items. If you need to make an item or another rune using the runic altar that involves a rune in the recipe, for instance, the Rune of Autumn requires a Rune of Fire and a Rune of Air, they will not be used in the process, or rather used up. They will be used, but you'll get them back. If used in other methods, like in a Petal Apothecary, it will not be refunded. And there you have it. This completes the first and most basic steps of Botania. There's plenty more to do and learn, and the Lexica Botania can be your guide. I hope you enjoy. Be sure to like, comment, subscribe, and spread the mischief if you think others will enjoy this content. And until next time, see ya.